What's up guys, it's Anthony from Pretty Print It here. In today's video, what I'll be doing is creating the weather app in Flask. So in the last video, I did this in Django and I wanted to show you how it would be done in Flask. And I think I'm going to actually do this in a couple of other frameworks as well, just so you can see how the same app can be built in different frameworks. So the app is consistent, but the differences between the frameworks becomes clear. So to build this app, I'll be using the Open Weather Map API, which is up here. So you'll have to sign up for an account if you want to follow along and then get your API key. I already signed up, so I won't be doing it again, but it's a pretty easy site to use. And just a reminder, if you haven't checked out my website, prettyprinted.com, you can check it out and see my free courses that I have for Flask and my other courses on Flask that can help you understand specific parts of Flask a little better or understand them in a progressive manner. So you start from the very beginning and work your way to more and more complicated things within Flask instead of watching random YouTube videos. So check that out on my site after you watch this video at prettyprinted.com. I'll have a link in the description below. So here's what our app is going to look like when it's done. This doesn't do anything. It's just a plain HTML page. But when we are done, you'll see that it actually works. Like for instance, right now, the weather in Las Vegas is not 29 degrees. It is not a thunderstorm with heavy rain. I don't think those two things would ever go together in Vegas. It would be hot and we have a thunderstorm, or it'd be cold and we have like no rain or anything. But basically, this is a placeholder. So when I actually build the app, it's going to be the actual data for whatever city that I'm showing here. So to get started, I have Flask set up already in my environment, and I have an app.py file. I have that template inside of my templates directory in my project. So those are pretty much the only two things I have right now to start. So to get started, I'll do from Flask, import Flask. And then I'll be using flask-sqlalchemy, so I'll get that now. And the form that I'm going to use is pretty simple, so I won't use WT forms, even though I could. So let me go ahead and install flask-sqlalchemy because I don't have it installed. And it should be pip-env install. And then I'll also use Python requests, so import requests. So while that installs, what I'll do is app is equal to flask_name, and then I'll do if name equals main. You know what? I won't do this one. I'll just set the Flask app to be app.py, and then I'll use Flask run just to change it up. So once flask-sqlalchemy finishes installing, I will install requests as well. But while I wait for that, I'll create a route that will return the template that I have. So it's just going to be the index because there's no need to have any other endpoints in this app. So I'll return render template, which I need to import from Flask up here. So render template. And then the name of my template is weather.html, which is inside of my templates directory. So this is done. So I'll install requests right now. And request should only take a moment to install. And then once request is done installing, I will run the app. And I'll have to export the Flask app, which is app.py, which is pretty straightforward to do. So export flask_app equals app.py. That allows me to use Flask run. And we see that my app is running there. So one thing I want to do is I want to set the debug equal to true. So I'll stop and then restart my app. And now I'll go to port 5000 and we should see. One thing I've noticed is that Firefox is really slow with the Flask development server for some reason. So I'll have to look into that. But we have the template displaying here. So I'm using Firefox to actually run the app. Chrome is just showing the HTML file. So now that I have this, what I want to do is I want to change this to be the actual weather in Las Vegas. So right now, this is just a placeholder. So if we look at the template, and I scroll down to that box with the weather, you see I just have the values typed in here. So if I change 29 degrees to like 85 degrees and refresh, we see the weather changes to 85 degrees, but that's not what I want. I want this to be the actual weather. So to do this, this is where the API comes in. So I'm going to use requests. And remember, you have to sign up for Open Weather Map if you want to do this. I have an account already, so I'm just going to paste in the URL. So the URL in this case is going to be this. And basically, it's the API endpoint, and then the query is going to be a blank, which represents the city. And then the units are going to be imperial, so I can see Fahrenheit. And then the app ID is the app ID that I'm getting from Open Weather Map. So if you sign up for their API, you'll see this on the dashboard as soon as you log in for the first time. And then I'll set the city to be Las Vegas. So eventually the city is going to pull from the database, but so I do this one step at a time. I'm going to set the city to Las Vegas directly, and then I'll change it later to come from the database. So what I'll do now is I will send a request to this API. So R is going to represent the response is equal to requests get, and then I'm passing that URL, and then I need to pass in the city. So by calling the URL the string .format city, I'm just injecting the city into that placeholder there. And then I want the JSON output of this, so I'll just type JSON just like that, and then I'll print R so we can actually see what the results are when I go here. So if I refresh the page, it should send a request to the API since this is inside of my view for that route. And that's exactly what I see. So I see some data return here because I just printed it to the console. And what I want to do is I want to take the data here and pretty much just put it inside of the template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dictionary that holds this data. So the data that is relevant is the city, the temperature, the description of the weather, and the icon that is needed for the weather. So I'll put it under here actually. So I'll just call this weather. And like I said, I need a city, and I'll just leave this blank for now. Temperature, the description, and the icon. And the icon comes from Open Weather Map. So let's see if I can find it in here. Basically, it returns an icon code, and then you use that code inside of a URL to actually get the image of the icon. So in this example, I have this little cloud with rain. That's the icon. And actually, I'll just take it from the template because it's there. So if I look at the template, where is it? Here we go. So openweathermap.org/img/w, and then the icon code. So the icon code in the example is 10D, and then whatever the actual weather is will have a different icon because it is not raining right now in Vegas. So the city, I'll leave as the city that I typed in before, but later this is going to come from the database. The temperature, if I look here, basically this is a dictionary that I'm looking in. So the temperature is coming from, let's see, temp, and this is inside of a key called main. So basically R, main, and then inside of main, it is another key called temp. And then for the description is, let's see, right now, the description is a few clouds. So it's inside of a list called weather, and it's the only item in the list, and then it's a key in there. So R, weather, and then inside of the list is the first element in the list, and then it's a dictionary. So the description is simply description. And then finally, the icon is in the same list. So the key is just icon instead of description. And I just put this after the comma. For some reason, it should be before the comma. So I remove that. And then here we have our weather. And then it's the first and only element in the list. And then the description is, or it's not going to be description, it's going to be icon. So icon just like that. So this is all the weather data that I'm concerned with. So if I now print this to the console instead of the response, so I'll get rid of the response print statement, and then I'll run my app again. And it's slow because Firefox is slow. Okay, so we see the city, we see the temperature, we see the icon, and we see the description. So the temperature right now is 58.35 degrees. You can round this if you want it. I'm not going to round it, but I mean, most people don't think of the weather in terms of something after the decimal, but the main idea is just to get the data from the API. So I'm going to pass weather to the template, and inside of the template, I'm going to update the values here. So weather.city is the name of the city, and then let's see, weather.temperature is the key that I use inside. Here is the description. So weather.description. And then finally here, the icon is going to be weather.icon. Just like that. Okay, so now let's try refreshing the app again. And if it works, everything here should be updated, and it has been updated. So now we see the temperature is 58.35 degrees Fahrenheit. There are a few clouds, and then we see the icon is correct. We see the sun that's behind this one cloud here. I guess that represents a few clouds, even though I only see one cloud here. So basically that's the idea for each individual city that you want to get the weather for. I'm only using one city right now, but next I'll make it to where I can use multiple cities. So what I want to do now is I want to create a table to hold all the cities that I'm interested in getting the weather for. So what I'll do is I'll create a flask-sqlalchemy class. So first I need to instantiate flask-sqlalchemy. And then I'll create a class, and it's going to be called city. Inherits from db.model. And then I need an ID column. So db column, db integer. And this is going to be the primary key. And then for the next column, I'll just have a name. So the name of the city. And I'll say the city can be up to 50 characters long. And then, I can put null equals false just to make this a not null column. And then I need to create this inside of an actual table. So first I need to create a configuration value for the database URI. So flask-sqlalchemy _database _URI is equal to SQLite, and we'll call this weather.db. So that's a database that I'll create right now. So SQLite 3 weather.db. And now I'll start up my Python REPL, and I'll import db from my app. So from app, import db. And let's see. Null is not the right name for it. So let's see. Is it isNull? I can't remember. Isnull. You know what? I'll just leave this. I'll try one more. Blank equals false. I can't remember the name of the key in flask-sqlalchemy for not null, but it's something like that. Yeah, so it's not blank, it's not null, and it's not, you know what? Let me look that up. So flask-sqlalchemy null column. And how about this? Flask-sqlalchemy has more concise documentation. So I'll look this up really quickly. Nullable. That's what I want. Nullable. It's kind of a weird word because that's not actually a word, but nullable is equal to false. Okay. So now if I import it, it should work. So db.createAll. And if I open up my database again, so weather.db, and look at the tables, I see the city table there. So now what I want to do is I want to just add a couple of cities to the database manually. And then later I'll set it to have the form add the cities in manually. So what I'll do is I'll have the form add the cities automatically, I should say. So from app import DB, and also I'm going to import city. And I'll create 2 cities. One city is going to be Seattle equals city, and then name is Seattle. And then the other city that I want to create is, let's say, London. So city name equals London. Okay, and then I'll just add those to the database. So Seattle and London. And I'll commit. And then I'll open up my database one more time. So weather.db, select star from city. And I see the 2 cities that I added there, Seattle and London. And of course, the primary key was generated for me automatically. So 1 and 2. So now what I want to do is I want to actually loop over those cities and get the weather for each individual city. So here at the top of my function, I'm going to create a variable that holds all the cities. And it's going to be a query from the city table. So city dot query all will give me all the cities in that table. And then what I want to do is I'm going to loop over these cities. So for city in cities. And because I'm using this variable city here, I'll get rid of the hard-coded one because I won't be using it anymore. And basically what I need to do is just indent this so it's inside of the loop. So basically what it's going to do for each city in the loop is going to send a request to the API, getting the weather for that particular city, and it's going to put it into this dictionary. But a further thing that I have to do is create a list to hold the weather for all the cities. So weather data dot append weather. So what this is going to do after every loop is going to append the weather for that particular city to the list. And then in the template, I'm going to loop over that list and actually display the weather. So I'll take weather data and pass it to the template instead of just weather. And then inside of the template, what I'll do is I will loop over the section that needs to be repeated. So in this case, it's the box. So for weather and weather data, and then in 4 down here. And we actually don't have to change anything inside of the loop because I'm using the same variable name. So weather is going to represent the weather for each individual city now instead of just Las Vegas. And it's going to display that information, and it's going to do that for each city in my list. So now if I start up my app and run it, we should see something a little different. And I got an error. So the error is the key error isn't working. The key isn't working correctly, and that's probably because one of the cities isn't returning the correct weather. So that's fine. Let's go ahead and debug it. So it says line 29. The temperature is not appearing for this particular city. So in that case, what I want to do is I want to print R, and then wherever it fails, I'll see what data was being returned. And that way we can kind of change our app to be a little more robust. So I'll run this again and it should fail, but it's going to print out the data here so I can see what's going wrong. So if I look here, I see a message city not found. So one of the cities it's not finding anywhere, which is a bit strange. So let's see. Oh, and actually, it's pretty obvious why it's not finding the city. So for city in cities, what this is doing is it's getting the city object for each city in the database. So a city represents a row in the database, but the city isn't the actual name of the city. It's just the city object. So if I want the actual name of the city, I have to type city.name. So minor mistake. So let's try running the app again. And then we'll see if it actually works this time. And kind of the same problem, but we see at least it's returning some data. So the reason why it says city 1 and city 2 is because here in the template, instead of using city.name, I'm using the city object. So that's pretty easy to fix. Here inside of the weather dictionary, I'll change this to city.name. So it's the actual name of the city. So if I run this again, well, actually need to restart like that. My debug mode isn't working correctly right now. That's why I have to manually restart. So I'm just refreshing, and now we see Seattle and London here, and we see the weather for each. So it's 48 degrees in Seattle, and it is 60 degrees in London right now. So now what I want to do, really the final thing that I want to do, is I want to allow the user to type something into this form, and it adds the city to the database. So that city will be added to the list here. So to do that, I need to first make sure that this form is working correctly. So it's form method post, and there's an input, and there is a button. So this input needs a name, and we'll just call this city. So now if I click add city, it tells me method not allowed, which is actually what I want. I just have to modify the route to accept get and post requests. And then from Flask, what I'll do is I'll import requests. Request is going to allow me to get the actual request method. So at the top, I'll add if request.method is post. I'll do one thing, and if it's get, then it just kind of falls out of that block and goes down here. So what I want to do is I want to get the city. So that's going to be request.form get city. And I'll assign this as the new city. And I'll simply add it to the database. So let's see. City name is going to be new city, and I'll call this new city object. I'll add it to the session, and then I'll commit it. There should be an add here. And also what I'll do is I'll just verify that this actually exists. So if new city, and if you don't put anything in, instead of returning a message, what I'll do is I'll just have the page work in the same way. So if you don't supply a new city, nothing happens. If you do, it gets added to the database. So that should be it. And by doing this, it should refresh the page, and we should see the new data. So if I restart my app again, go to endpoint, and then type in a new city. So Las Vegas, add city. Now we see Las Vegas has been added to the list. And if I type in one more city, so let's see, another city, Shanghai, add city, we get the weather for Shanghai as well. So that's all there is to this app. I know it's a pretty simple app, but it kind of illustrates what needs to be done in Flask as opposed to Django. In terms of the code, it's fairly straightforward because it's in one file. Obviously, you can break this up, but really you only have two things. You have a route and you have a model. So there's really no need to break it up in this particular case. But if the app were more complicated, then it would be a good idea. But you see, it's fairly straightforward. So now that I've covered this in Flask and Django, I'll probably do it in another framework. I'm thinking Express next. I haven't done that at all on my channel, so we'll see if I use Express to kind of do the same thing. But that's it. I'll put this code on my GitHub so you can get it, and I'll put a link in the description below. If you have any questions about this app, you can always leave a comment down below and I'll answer it. Like I said, if you're interested in my Flask courses, you can go to my website, prettyprinted.com, and you can check them out. And finally, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. and like this video if you haven't liked it already. So thank you for watching this video, and I will talk to you next time.